All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Holland, and I am the head of product marketing at CureMint. Longtime messaging snob and really enjoying having the ability to own and build a function from scratch at CureMint. Previously came from LucidLink and even before jumping into the technology world, had a stint in the manufacturing. So B2B throughout, not just in software, but also in physical products that you can hold in your hand. So yeah, really, my expertise is a healthy blend of customer success, sales, product management, and then now, of course, the heavy dose of product marketing to kind of really tie everything together. So I really feel like I attack from a different approach because I've got a different sense than a traditional marketer might have.
Awesome. I appreciate that you're here, and you and I had a chance to kind of chat about some experiences you've had with positioning messaging challenges. And I wanted to see if you could just start off diving into, your most recent situation and what you're dealing with and kind of how you're approaching that.
Yeah, I think that's where I'd love to start as well, because that's kind of what I was brought in here to do at CureMint, was to really take their positioning, almost throw it away in its own sense, but really look at it and see what needs to be done. Where is the value that we're bringing to the market, and find something that's not just concrete and that can last, but something that's differentiated, right? Because um, as we all know, we're not getting fewer SaaS companies out there. The market's getting more saturated, and it wasn't just about coming in and finding good messaging. It was coming and finding great messaging and something that really stood out and could move the needle for CureMint. So um, going through the process, right, I did my research and saw where their messaging was at, and there was a lot of question marks. I think for me, that was a really exciting challenge, because I think for anyone who's working on messaging, the number one thing that should happen in terms of a prospect or a customer seeing any of your messaging should be, this is for me or this is not for me, right? And either of those options is totally fine. But what the option that you should never have happen is them see your message and then say, well, what is it? Right. And that really brings it into a clarity piece. And I think that's what CureMint was lacking for a long time. They did the traditional message. I call it FOMOF, where it's fear of missing out on features, right? You just really want to just talk about all your features, but you haven't really thought about what the outcomes are. And so I came in and I've really, over the last 90 days now, taken a hard look at what's established. And then we've done I think the more fun part, and that's start talking to the customers, watching gong calls, and really hearing about what they're saying and the problems that they're facing, the outcomes that they're hoping for, and then putting the pieces together and weaving that narrative has been really fun over the last 90 days. And I'd say, for me, it started off really, I think if you jump into the messaging piece first, you're kind of doing it wrong. I think we'd all holistically say that you need to start. Every house needs a foundation, and that foundation is the positioning. So we took it back from scratch, really looked at it and from a different lens. Recently, I took the B2B messaging course from Olivine and Winter, did a joint course, and I had a different approach. I think I originally look at positioning messaging in a way of kind of a waterfall. You've got these problems, then there's these trends that are causing these problems. Now let's frame this dream world solution. And then from there, you can attach the features that really start speaking to that. And then to wrap it all up, is to get those validation points, right? You need to hear your customers talking about it. You need to pull data that actually validates all of the great stuff you're saying. But the new approach was establishing an enemy. I think the great example they use that resonates with me and has been sticking through a lot of my efforts, even though it might be a B2C space, is liquid death. You know, obviously they're selling water, right? We've drank water in a variety of bottles and shapes, and you know, Fiji's one of my favorites in particular. But they've taken a whole different approach, and it's death to plastic, right? And so they've created an enemy in plastic. And as well, if you look at their messaging, it's about murdering your thirst. So it's not about hydration anymore, right? They just want to kill your thirst, and they want to bring death to plastic. So they've created this enemy, and that was kind of their basis. And then they tie it back into kind of your vision, right? Every good company should have a vision. So once you combine your vision, add your enemy, you should kind of have some unique point of view out of that. Something that's different from every other competitor in the marketplace. And that really helps you establish something unique. And from there, I think that drives into the mission, right? And if you're not familiar with the mission part, that's more of your short term, maybe 2 to 5 year goal, something that is palpable and achievable. And then I felt like that was kind of, the baseline for me. And once I felt good about that, and we established our enemy and had that strong mission that resonated, now our strategic narrative moved into the position, and we could establish our what, our who, our why, and our how, based on all of those customer calls, all of those research points that I've brought in. And we basically went from smart procurement and AP software to innovation for the dental industry, so they can go from healthcare underdogs to healthcare heroes, right? And that's kind of the foundation of what we're going to do going forward. And using words like spend management and cost management, right? That's kind of what everyone else in the market's doing. And what I've seen from our calls is one thing's very clear. What our customers come to CureMint for is so they can see what is going on in their business, right? They want visibility. They don't want spend management. They don't want cost management. They're looking for something, tangible, and they just want to see what's going on. So really that's kind of the root of us going forward in our messaging. And then, from there it was like, let's figure out what the competitor's doing, right? I wanted to make sure that we had a good sense of that. So if you're not doing competitive intel before you jump into your actual messaging piece, you're kind of missing out. I would say, to anyone trying to do this the right way, there's 3 pieces of research you need to do. It's kind of like A plus B equals C type thing. But you need 3 pieces of it. So it's more of like the Pythagorean theorem in a way. Let's put it in that type of realm. So you need to have that customer research, of course, right? They're going to tell you a lot of the stuff that you just need to say. And then, of course, you need to do the market research, right? You need to understand who you need to be talking to, what the market, structure is like, what's coming down the road. And then you need that competitive piece, particularly, I think, to really differentiate yourself. Because especially an untrained, messenger, you may jump into that spend management, cost management field, right? And that's more of a feature and not an outcome that they're looking for. So again, do the competitive research and then start tying it in to actionable messaging. And what I like to reference, and again, shout out to Olivine and Winter for this knowledge, is the cereal box approach. If you were to look at a box of Cheerios, basically, has the name, your product name, right? It'll then have a subhead, like in a benefit attached to it. I think Cheerios is 100% whole grain oats, right? So it gives you that subhead, that benefit. You need to have a strong, powerful outcome right there in your above the fold, right? So that would be for them, can help lower cholesterol. Okay, so now we're not just talking about features, which would be like, the 160 calories per serving or whatever, 0 trans fats. Those are all features, but the outcome that people would care about is we're going to have lower cholesterol. And that was really big in terms of how I looked at this. So you basically look at the cereal box as a product description. So what is your product in 5 words or less? Like very simple. I use this example a lot with my CEO when we've been workshopping together. If you hand someone, a glass of just a glass, a cup of some kind, and they ask you what it is, you're not going to say it's something to fill, to put water in or to put your Kool-Aid in or your favorite drink. It's a cup, right? That's all it is. It's a cup. So then you get into the headline, and it's basically a compelling, headline image with the buyer that makes them want to learn about the product. It's kind of a combo of why we exist and then what we do. And then from there, you take it to a subhead where you're kind of just teasing the problem and how you're fixing it. You need to have that powerful benefit outcome, right? Right, basically right after that, it's what your target buyer is using that combination of features for, right? Not necessarily talking about the features, but what those features are going to give them. An important piece is from my perspective is having that customer evidence, right? Having some piece that validates it, because you can say you're the best, you can say you're the fastest, you can say all these things, but if you don't have that data point, there's nothing there that leads me to believe you, right? It's a leap of faith at that point. So don't forget that validation point. It could be a customer testimonial. It could be a case study. It could be just a simple statistic, but you have to find those things. And then you go ahead and list all those awesome features that you've built. Because really they need a mental checklist at that point, right? They've understood your story. They're realizing, yes, this is pain and I have this problem and this is my real world that I live in. And they'll then mentally check off the features, right? And so kind of tying back to it of the foam off is there's no point of attaching a feature if you don't have those supplemental pieces before that I talked about. And so it was a really therapeutic exercise for myself and my CEO, because we got to look at this really in a holistic approach. And as you start to build out the messaging, you see the narrative tie in, right? Everything from the vision to the enemy and now down into our cereal box exercise, it all makes sense to us. And when we put it in front of customers now, don't forget this piece, it makes sense to them too. They're like, yeah, this is what I came to CureMint for. So we've really, over the last 90 days, spent some great time in just making sure we felt really good about it. Did some message testing, and now we're at a place where we're ready to bring that messaging to the market. So I'm really excited to take what really I'd say my first real lead messaging work, where I've been given most of the responsibility, if not all of it. It's nice to feel confident, right? And by doing it the right way and following those steps, you're now in a place where you can articulate all of that great stuff in a variety of different ways, right? We can now run campaigns that resonate because we know what we're talking about. Our sales team is now using the right stuff, and you see people light up during these calls, right? You see the light bulb turn on a lot faster, and our deals are shortening from X amount of days, and we're cutting about 30% off of that now because they're understanding it. And when we're enabling our customer success team, they're using that same language that has been used on them in the sales process. So there isn't this disconnect now, and there's not that waterfall approach where you have to say, how you do this and then this and then this. It's just like it's one simple fluid narrative now. And I think for me now, we're at the point of creating content. And so that's the copy, right? And so you've got your foundation of positioning. We've put up some walls now, right? And the ceiling's up. So we've got the messaging in place. And now it's time to pretty it all up. Let's put some paint, let's decorate it. And that's the copy, right? And that's where I think a lot of people skip, right? They kind of maybe go straight to copy and they don't have like their solidified messaging and they don't know how to tie it in. And then you give it to the rest of the marketing team and they're kind of like, well, what value prop should I use for this customer and for this persona? What do they care about? Right. So now we've got this all super defined, super available, super communicated internally. And now we can do the copy pieces. And content creation for me has been, so much easier in every aspect of it. If you're using AI, then great. Your prompts, it takes you way less time just thinking about your prompt. If you're, actually creating stuff, the old fashioned way, then you're not spending all of this time wondering about what I should write about. You know what you should write about. Now it's just how do I write it? And a lesson that I've been learning, or at least not maybe learning, I think I've known this for a while, but I've been able to apply quite a bit over these last month or so, is that hero's journey, right? And we may all talk about it or we've heard it, but I'm a huge movie guy and TV shows as well. But movies, I mean, for past dozen years or so, I have been the guy going to a movie at like Tuesday or Wednesday night by himself just to like see the new thing. I don't think I've missed a Marvel movie premiere. Like I go that Thursday before, right? It all gets crazy and I watch it. And although you can make your comments about, everything seems the same or whatever, the box office numbers don't lie. And people still go back to see these stories because at the end of the day, this hero's journey is a real thing. And so when you start to write your copy, I think that's like what I think about the most is how do we create that hero's journey throughout the whole process. And, to kind of run through that, here's how I look at it. It's very simple. You got to give them some reason to explore, right? Hopefully it's on their own. Hopefully they're feeling some type of pain and they're like, oh, I got to search for a solution. But sometimes it's not that easy. And I'm actually in an industry right now where the dental industry sometimes is kind of blind to their problem before it hits them in their face. And sometimes then it's even too late. So there's this extra work that kind of needs to be done, but you have to give them a reason to explore, right? And so that's basically putting the problem front and center. So they know that there is a reason to go find a solution. And then you introduce, to me, some type of weapon that'll help them fight the battle, right? And I think that's a lesson that I really take into heart because, Star Wars, for example, one of my favorites. As the company, right, as CureMint, we aren't Luke Skywalker going and fighting Vader and defeating the dark side. You know what I mean? It's the customer who is the hero here. And we need to make sure that when we go and write that copy, that we are the lightsaber, right? We may even be the Force, right? But we are not Luke. He is the one going out and fighting the battle. He is our customer. He is the one doing all this amazing stuff. And we're just attached to his hip, giving him that extra boost he needs to fight those battles and win them. And what I see a lot of times, and I mean, even just walking around the store, you see this like, hey, we can do this thing for you. And really it's like, no, we're going to help you get that job to be done. Or we're going to help you solve that pain that you've been having forever. And I think at that point, it really makes you I think one, just make you look more professional and less conceited, right? It makes you feel like as the buyer that you're the hero. And I think that should be the goal when you're writing messaging is someone should feel so inspired that if you get, if they're able to merge with that offering that they're seeing, they will be the hero. And that could be saving money for their business. That could be getting a promotion. That could be just making their life simpler. But if they feel like the tool is doing all of it, you're missing out on a huge emotional impact. And at the end of the day, it's what I've seen, it's a less effective way to market. So when you're getting to that copy piece, go ahead and watch a Star Wars movie, watch Lord of the Rings, right? Think about it in that perspective of how the customer can be Frodo and could be Luke, right? It doesn't need to be your product, and it shouldn't be your product. It should always be the other way around. You're just, a guide. Obviously, your content should be their guide. Your sales team should be their guide, their mentor, and your offering, your product should be the weapon that helps them defeat all their problems. So yeah, that's what we've been doing over the last 90 days, and we're seeing good results, even though we haven't necessarily published anything. Just from the verbal side of our messaging has been really good, and that's really how we've tackled this challenge. And everyone's feeling very confident internally. And I think the one thing that I've learned is that you can do message testing and you'll get data back, and it helps you. But at the end of the day, if everyone's feeling really good, really confident, and there aren't all these holes being poked through everything, then you have a really good go-to-market strategy with how you're going to vocalize your product. And for me, this was all a big learning lesson too, because like I said, this is when I got kind of my first stint where I've been given the ownership, given the responsibility, given the trust to say, fix this, right? Tell our story, communicate it to the world in a way that makes sense and that resonates and that obviously drives revenue, right? And so I think from a learning perspective, this isn't my first time trying to write good messaging. This isn't my first time trying to solve this problem, and in my past, I've actually approached this a very similar way. Like, if your narrative is all about you, that's a problem, right? And then when you add the foam off, right, the fear of missing out on features, now you're just like you've gotten this world of convolution and confusion. And when you add, I think it's like 40,000 or so B2B SaaS companies right now in the world. How are you going to fight that battle? When you sound like everyone else, when you're saying the same things that other people are saying, and you're not communicating your true value. So, yeah, I've tried to do this before and kind of worked on a whole skunkworks project, even where it was like, I'm talking to customers, right? Doing good research, talking actually even vendors looking to do some work where they were actually our ICP. And it just so happened that, we talked about it. And the question I like to ask was, what do we do? Have you taken a look at our website? And the answer was, I don't know. And it was like, whoa, light bulb here. You don't know what we do, but you are the exact person we want to use our product. You are the exact person that we would like to do a case study with. So how is it, right, that you don't get it? And it wasn't because of anything visually, right? It wasn't because they couldn't try the product for free and see how it worked. It's because it wasn't communicated properly. And so I actually, did things a different way, right? Like, as I said, this new framework of even the cereal box brought into it was new, but the same approach was kind of taken. It was looking at problems and making sure we knew what they were. But before you got into, right, the messaging piece, it was like, let's build some type of position here. And I knew that was paramount. So although I did it a different fashion, we ended up with something that felt really good, right? It sounded different, it felt different, and it came from the voices of our customers even. And I won't harp on this too much, but I'm a big proponent of just asking your customers. It tends to be the quickest way for a win. And so you introduce that. We built out something that felt good and had all the customer validation points. At the end of the day, obviously, it was a skunkworks project, and so wasn't necessarily sanctioned, and there's a lot of other people involved in making that decision. But at the end of the day, I can say things really probably haven't changed much in terms of how the message is being communicated. And can't really speak to obviously growth and all that, but from the looks of things, if I were to audit the website, it'd be pretty much a lot of foam off. It would be a lot of here's we're the champion as opposed to the customer being the champion. And I think, from all intents and purposes, it's probably impacting growth, right? It's probably from all intents and purposes of what I hear in the market, it's probably making leads a lot harder to get because it's budget cutting time right now. So if you can't articulate yourself very clearly, I like clarity is the word I like to use. You're already at a disadvantage because there's other people out there who are making it clear. So when the dollars need to be spent, there's this aspect of trust and confidence that you need to have that you didn't need to have 24 months ago, right? Everyone was spending whatever they wanted to. And now you have to feel super confident in your partner, in your technology partner. And the very first step of that is what do they do? Who do they do it for? And why do they do it? And I can assume that, that's obviously impacting leads. And then when you get the leads, right, you probably have very longer sales cycles because you're almost over communicating in a negative way, right? You're saying almost all the wrong things. And the right things that you are saying kind of get diluted at that point, and they're not as strong. They're not staying in everyone's minds. You're overcomplicating what they think the offering actually is and what the value would bring to their team. So you get in the situation of longer sales cycles, less leads, and revenue then is probably harder to come by. So, of course, I could do an audit and I could do all these things, but knowing the state of the game right now and seeing the people coming out, for example, Liquid Death is a great example. Canned water, you'd never think they're a brand as big as they are, but they've done such a good job by defining themselves in a way that's completely different than everybody else. And I can tell you right now, it's something that's in my fridge on a regular basis. So, if you come out to the market with vanilla, unplanned, right? If you tried to put up your walls and paint before you have the concrete foundation underneath, you're going to see things fall. You're going to see, marketing efforts are going to be tougher just to even write copy. You can have you can use every AI tool in the book, but if you can't feed it a message that's coherent, it's going to make up, the same type of incoherent messaging that you kind of have, just in maybe a different flavor or whatever. So if you don't have the foundational positioning down and then solid messaging targeted to each persona, don't even bother writing copy. You're basically just throwing stuff out there and hoping it sticks, as opposed to knowing it'll stick and doing the research that validates all of it. So yeah, man, I'd say in a nutshell, two pretty different experiences, I'd say, in terms of solving or facing the problem of messaging and how to address it. But at this point in my career, it's actually one of my favorite things to do. And I think when you solve the problem of messaging, there's all of these other problems that get fixed that you really didn't even think were connected, but it kind of really all is at the end of the day.
So many things I want to unpack with you with this. So I
On me.
wrote down some little cues for myself because there's quite a few little specific things that you mentioned that I want to just kind of go back to a little bit and flesh out a little bit. And one thing to you, what you're saying right now about if you get the messaging right, that's actually on my website, because I'm like, if you get the messaging right, the rest falls into place. And maybe that's because I'm coming from a messaging and copywriting background, so I'm a little biased. But that's really how I look at it. Like, yes, you have to get the positioning, obviously, is the foundation, but like how many times, I can't even count how many times I've been involved in projects where they're like, write some creative copy. right? And then it's like that creative copy is like, there's no foundation at all. There's no messaging, there's no framework, there's no anything. And
Yeah.
then it's like, well, what does creative mean? Who cares about creative? Who are you trying to get? Well, small business owners. Okay, you're like, cool, like they're all the same, right? Small business owners are all the same type of person who care about this. No. So I just want to make that point real quick. Like all these things that you're saying, like I'm nodding frantically in the camera. But I wanted to go back to a few things specifically, one by one. First, I want to start out with, I love how you say at the beginning, this is for me or this isn't for me. This is binary kind of go, no go kind of choice point, right? The FOMO, I love that. The fear of missing out on FOMO, sorry, on features, right? Because that goes to what I see is the core problem. Like if we were just to get to where is that ultimate bottleneck in all this stuff? It's the unwillingness to make a hard decision, right? As marketers or as a company or whatever, right? And
Yep.
so to your point about this more recent or this previous experience where it's this, you're stuck in this status quo, right? You're stuck in this kind of, we still want to be everything to everybody. We don't want to, we're afraid of missing out on anything. So we're going to try to finagle our way out of this through creativity or whatever. And, I'm all about creativity, but there are limits to creativity, right? So I
Yep.
want to ask you to start out with just if you can give just an idea of with this current company you're with right now, when you say, talking to customers, who do you define? You mentioned something about they want visual, they want to see into their business, right? How is it that you've defined who your customers should be, right? Because I imagine even if you were to call 100 customers, if you have the time, you might get lots of different versions of what they care about. But at some point, you have to decide, like, why is one customer ideal and another one isn't, even if they're both active?
Figuring out who are your kind of best customers, who are you best suited for right now, right? There's always opportunity to grow, but you have an offering that you've created and it's right now, right? And so you need to be choosy. You need to be selective. You need to be willing to make that hard decision that not every single person in the world is meant to have your product, right? Because you're going to end up putting burden on your customer success teams because they're doing onboarding that takes them way longer than it needs to, or they're doing what I affectionately call forever boarding, where no matter what you do, the customer's coming back to customer success to solve the problem, right? Because your offering may not be ready for that particular customer. So we ran a persona workshop where I brought in internally about 7 experts on our product, our customers, and just the market. And that was the first thing we did is I made them make a hard decision and say, who are our top 5 best customers? And then I need a little bit of information as to why they're our best customers. And then on the flip side, it was what are our 5 like problem children, right? What are the ones that we would say in a dream world they didn't sign up with us, right? And then also, why is that? And then it was a really therapeutic, we all got to really break some bread and say, we can't have everybody, right? And we may not want everyone right now because then, right, customer success was like, if we had 10 more of these, I don't know what we do. And you have the innovation product team saying the same thing, like, we have all of these extra tasks and maintenance items that we're doing for this one specific customer. So it was really easy at that point to kind of say, here's who we don't want to go after. And then it left a much smaller piece of the pie for us to start thinking and segmenting into actual personas. And then from there, let's look at a buyer user, approach. I think we have in our product specifically, we have 2 very distinct groups. We have people who are going to be in our product every single day, or at least every single week. And then there's going to be people who quite literally will never use it. They're probably just signing the dotted line, but at the end of the day, it all impacts how are they able to impact their strategy, right? The strategy that they're trying to influence right now it's kind of hard for them to reach those goals. So there's a completely different, mindset for them. They care about growing and making the business healthy and being able to achieve those revenue or those, just general business goals. But our users, they just want to get in. They want to have an easier time doing their job. They want more time to doing the stuff they want to do at work, and they want to leave work on time, right? So completely different problems, completely different ways to message to these customers. So it was then breaking it up into those buckets. And then obviously you've in certain situations like ours, there's that hybrid bucket. There's the people who are using the product and they're like heavily involved in the decision making. So you need to have a holistic view for them that they also want the ease and the speed and the simplicity, but they want that visibility as well. They need that visibility or they can't make decisions for their managerial side of the business. And so really it was kind of from that point kind of easy to chop it up. We've got people who care about seeing things because they can't, their business can't grow without it. They can't scale. They can't even, project what the finances should be. And then you've got the frontline workers, right? The users more or less who are coming in and they are spending 4 hours doing one specific task, but instead we can now get that to 30 minutes. Or we can, give them way more peace of mind and confidence in the decisions they're making. So at the end of the month, their boss doesn't come back to them and say, why'd you, overspend by X, Y, and Z? So it was that part, I think, got a little bit easier for us once we could clearly say who are the people we don't want to go after. And then for us, it was kind of like you said, you can't be for everybody, and we're not for everybody, right? So I'd say I can't really give a rule of thumb for anyone, but we've ended up landing on 6 persona types. Basically 3 fit into the decision maker realm, and then 3 ended up fitting into the user realm. And now we have clear paths of messaging for both of those, right? We're going to talk visibility. We're going to talk site. We're going to talk knowing what's going on for that buyer group. And we're going to talk about, just getting stuff done faster and easier for that user group. And now we can communicate it in such a way, and breaking into the messaging was so much easier, because I can even say when I have tried to do messaging in the past without that type of work, without that persona work being done, you're just talking to an abyss. It's hard to even talk one-on-one and be conversational because you feel like your message has to be in an auditorium full of 500 people, of all different types, as opposed to you sitting on the couch with a friend that their pains, their problems, and you just talk to them. And so when you take that effort to break it down into personas and make that hard decision to leave some people out, then you're going to have a much more tighter message. You're going to be able to really narrow in on the people that matter, and you're going to be able, almost in a shield. And that's what I've actually spoken to my CEO about. Our new messaging is now a defense mechanism against the customers we don't want. Like we have purposely pigeonholed. If you fit in this bucket, you're not for us. We're not for you. And we don't want to put you in a position of chaos, just as much as we don't want to put ourselves in a position of chaos. And that is something I think that's extremely valuable and maybe underutilized in messaging, is how do we deflect the people who we've decided aren't our ICPs. And then that'll give more time for the sales team to focus on the good leads. And then customer success obviously won't be pulling their hair out or turning gray because they've got these excess problem children that probably shouldn't have made it through the funnel in the first place.
Yeah, and the ability, either as a marketer or a salesperson or an entrepreneur or a consultant or coach, whatever it is, right? to be able to say and really mean it, I might not be the right fit for you, or we might not be, or this might not be the right fit for you, is not only liberating because it frees you from so much chasing, right? But also, like, to your point, it is a filter. That messaging is now a filter against the, you know, it's not personal against them. It's not, you're just not the right fit, right? You're not the best. You're not what they need. And now, as we wrap up, I did want to ask one more thing, and this is somewhat self-serving because you mentioned earlier AI, right, and prompts. So obviously, AI has gotten a lot of attention the last few months, right? A lot more than it's gotten in the last, few years. Now, I've been a copywriter for almost more than 20 years now, right? And I do consulting and coaching, all these different things, but I'm getting the whiff of the copywriting side of my career starting to potentially die, right? Because of like hearing about, chat GPT and all these things. So I'm just curious if as we wrap up, you mentioned being able to take your messaging, which might be your narrative framework, or however you're kind of structuring that, and using it as prompts for an AI or some kind of tool to be able to then create copy. And I was curious if you could just walk us through real quick, like what that actually looks like for you, what kind of results you've gotten, because I'm looking at this from both sides. I'm going like, on one hand, there's the part of me that's like, no bot can ever do what a good copywriter can do. But then the reality is that if there's people that are using tools to write copy, that's what they're doing, right? It's like, it doesn't matter whether the writers out there or designers think that they can't be replaced. If they're being replaced, they're being replaced. So I'm curious, as somebody who uses that, like how that actually looks in real life.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm probably in this weird hybrid because I'm a purist as well. Like I love writing. In fact, um, I think it's one of like the things that I can stand out from, just in general. But that being said, obviously, yeah, I use Jasper and Chat GPT respectively. And I'll be honest with you, it gives me more of a creative soundboard than like my copywriter. I'll be honest. Um, my prompt, like when I didn't have solidified messaging at first, like we didn't go through the exercise and I was just kind of even trying to make something work, everything came out super incoherent, right? I didn't like anything. And it was very, even the idea, like the idea generation part of it, where it would be like, okay, well, this sucks, but I like the idea. So let me just actually write this. Even I wasn't getting that. But now that we've done the messaging work, right? And I can go in there and be like, this is the message, this is the target persona, and obviously here's my brand voice. It gives me a really good brainstorm of where I can go, as opposed to let me sit here for like 30 minutes and write that first really bad one, right? That's like every good writer knows, just write and make it super bad. And then you go back, you do your edits. And it helps me reduce that time. But it is not, and at least in the current state for me, I can't ever generate something and then like directly put that in anywhere without at least 30 minutes of editing, at least like bare minimum of human editing on, I'd say 200 words or less, or, I'd say that's the 30-minute mark. Anything above 200 words, it's like, yeah, you're going to go back in there. You're going to do a lot of the editing work. But I have really enjoyed the experience from having like a brainstorm, right? Almost having a little administrator who we can be creative together. And then I actually end up doing the finished product, but not have to spend so much time in that initial first draft brainstorm ideas phase. But
And
don't worry, your job's safe as a copywriter.
yeah,
Just just like designers are safe from Midjourney right now. I'll be honest. I use Midjourney for some fun. Started a little side business with basically AI generated art. You can either do clothing or wall art. And I will be fully transparent that copywriters, designers, marketers, no one's losing their job. But I do highly encourage to just use it as your part of your creative process.
Mm.
You'll get weird ideas that you may never have thought of. It's not going to give you good copy. It's not going to give you good messaging. It's definitely not going to give you positioning, but it gives you an ability to just throw some ideas also and get some ideas back.